Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with Dr. Jessie Mahoney.
And Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are physicians and leaders who are also trained in coaching, yoga, mindfulness, and integrative medicine.
We are also mothers, spouses, sisters, daughters, aunts, and friends.
In this podcast, we share candid, heart-centered, loving, science-based, thoughtful, and often fun conversations about the challenges life throws at us.
With our collective experience of over 30 years in physician and personal wellness, we reflect and offer pearls of wisdom for navigating life's challenges with more ease.
From parenting, marriages, money scarcity, cancer survivorship, uncertainty, challenges in practicing medicine, we cover it all.
We invite you to refresh your perspective and empower yourself with mindset, mindfulness, and other well-being tools that actually work. A quick reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice.
What does non-striving in mindfulness mean, and why might you want to try it? The inspiration for this podcast was a question from someone at my retreat this weekend. And they said, what does this non-striving mean? What is it about? Why would anybody want to not strive?
I am so excited about this topic because I am embodying the non-striving era in my life. And I put in parentheses, finally, and I'm loving it. So the intention for today is to discuss what the invitation of non-striving is.
And our takeaways are that non-striving is not about giving up aspirations and goals. It's about letting go of control and of needing things to be a certain way or to focus on having certain outcomes. As we begin today, we'll begin with a pause to embody non-striving for a moment. And non-striving offers the invitation of pausing. And with that, deciding what would feel good in your moment of non-striving. Pausing to be, pausing to breathe, pausing to not focus on anything on your lists, on what's ahead, pausing to be present in this moment, enjoying your breath, enjoying the moment. Respecting the moment exactly as it is. And when you feel complete, opening eyes, coming back together. And we hope you enjoyed that intentional practice of giving yourself permission to not strive and pause.
So non-striving is one of the foundational principles of mindfulness. And I wanted to read an excerpt from the Mindful Leader website. So non-striving is a conscious decision. So it is an intention to allow things in your life or in the world to be as they are, rather than always reacting to try to change things in this particular moment. So in our current corporate culture, for instance, and even in the healthcare culture, life is so much about doing, going to the next thing. What's the next task? What's the next achievement? But non-striving creates the space to simply be. Part of non-striving includes letting go of the doing. So instead of constantly doing, like we were in healthcare training, non-striving is more about focusing on being in this moment, allowing yourself to experience this moment without judgment, especially since the moment is already here. So, bringing up the healthcare training environment, a lot of the experience that we garnered that made us the healthcare professionals that we are today was about going from one environment to another to garner as much clinical experience as we could in that allotted time that was set aside for training for med school residency fellowship, for instance. And it's only been more recent that space has been suggested and also more protected to allow healers to really process and simply be from the myriad of experiences that being a healer brings up, especially those experiences from training. But even as attendings with healthcare careers in general as well, other careers as well, are still focused on doing, like task and achievement oriented, like asking ourselves, what's the next thing to do or achieve? What's our next goal? Still without much space to simply be, just as you are right here, right now.
Holly MacKenna mentioned in our podcast recently that being is where the magic and the healing happen. And the magic and the healing don't happen from doing your to-do list or focusing on your to-do list. Many people love a to-do list because the checking off releases dopamine. But in that release of dopamine, we miss the doing, we miss the moment. And then we wonder where the meaning and the magic and the connection in our lives are. And these moments of non-striving are powerful. Non-striving also includes accepting yourself and others, accepting yourself as you are, not needing to be someone else, not needing to fix yourself, and accepting both the good parts and the bad parts of you. And it offers a way out of people pleasing. It offers you the chance to do things in ways that work for you and to sort of connect with your authenticity. Many people, myself included, were told, you aren't supposed to do it that way. Or when I was a kid, I used to make up words, which is funny because now I like to make up words all the time in my work, but it wasn't okay. That wasn't a word. You can't use that word. It's not a word. And I had a lot of shame around what really was like creativity and a superpower. And very often when someone is approaching something a different way, we all might be able to learn from it. It might be part of the solution. And so allowing ourselves to stop rejecting ourselves and to enjoy who we are and to appreciate who we are and acknowledge who we are is part of non-striving. We don't need to be someone else. We don't need any more degrees. If we want them, or there's something there in the learning that sounds fun, that's very different. But recognizing that we can accept ourselves as we are. And the invitation, of course, is to also accept others as they are and accept our children just as they are. Very often we want them to change or be different than they are, and to accept a partner as they are. And I know for me, discovering that I was in a neurodiverse marriage, this has helped me tremendously to accept things as they are and to recognize that there are not right ways and wrong ways, that we are all very different. And I would have said that I had that lens, and I also recognized that there was a lot more accepting in this life that I can do. And it brings so much peace. And non-striving is really the path to moments of peace.
Expanding upon acceptance to also include circumstances. So, accepting this moment for what it is because it's already here. And when you resist accepting what's already present, that causes suffering.
Being content and non-judgmental about where you are is a form of acceptance, but it's a little more than that. Really, truly bringing this idea of non-judgment and or allowing contentment without the need to be anywhere else or grow it a certain way. And I think for me, this is my big growth area. You're practicing non-striving in a bit of a different way, I think. But I've started to realize that I'm always used to having a next project. And in many ways, I like that. It makes me feel alive. But my most creative next projects come when I am happy where I am and content where I am, and pausing to make sure that you enjoy where you are along the way and enjoy these moments. And in medicine, we were taught a little bit the opposite. Like if you pause to enjoy it, something bad will happen. And so it is very uncomfortable for us to sit and practice being content or satisfied. And yet, for many of us, we have so many of the things we wanted. So if we could pause and just enjoy having these things that we wanted and worked so hard to do. It's different than gratitude, which is actually not non-striving because it's garnering a certain feeling about certain things. And so just it's accepting it and allowing that sense of peace and contentment fits into striving. And I want to add that though that sounds very easy, it is not. It's very uncomfortable to step out of that collective suffering and to step into peace for a little bit. It's almost, we are comfortably uncomfortable with focusing on the problems and fixing them. And even if there's no problem, focusing on the next thing. Many of us buffer with striving. What's next? What's next? What do I need to do? So we don't have to be in the discomfort of the moment. But where we learn to find peace is to actually be in the moment. And literally, it's unfamiliar as opposed to uncomfortable. And if we can just understand that we're just not used to it, we can discover something really amazing.
It kind of reminds me of our recent podcast about sitting on nails. So, like, is striving a nail that you are afraid of getting up from?
Yeah. Or an addiction.
Mhm.
Many of us, I think, I often talk about being addicted to suffering or addicted to busyness. Many of us are addicted to striving.
Well, I am very intentionally practicing allowing myself to feel the spaciousness of contentment as we speak. And it is a practice, definitely not perfected, because there's a lot of unlearning involved. And yeah, it's definitely uncomfortable, but I am relishing in this space that has been created in my nervous system. Thanks me for it. So I highly recommend it.
And it's taking tons of practice, I want to point out, because mindfulness is a practice and this non-striving is a practice. And much of what is encompassed in non-striving is many of those other mindfulness tenets and approaches, like accepting and non-judgment, and patience, for example. And so I think, and letting go. So it's interesting that they're all woven together in this way of being rather than doing.
So, in speaking about that, non striving creates that space to be. So, trying less and being more, doing less and being more. So, non striving creates a space to be rather than always reacting to try to change things from what they actually are in this particular moment. This is an invitation to be and moving away rather from doing. So we are, as a reminder, in fact, human beings. We are not human doings.
And many are uncomfortable with being a human being and not a human doing. We are comfortable doing, and we believe that this doing is how life gets better. And I want to point out that non-striving is not about giving up aspirations and goals. And in fact, moments of non-striving I see as a catalyst for change and authentic and aligned change. So non-striving is about letting go of the control of the process and letting go of things needing to be a certain way. And it's pausing long enough to notice if what we seek, what we are looking for, and what we are striving to accomplish, is that actually what we want? it helps us identify our true wants versus maybe our should wants. And so when we get out of this outcome focus of what it is that we think we need to accomplish and enjoy the process, we often end up in a different spot that is more aligned. And so in medicine, we're taught delayed gratification. And when you get there, you'll feel better. And when you get here, you'll feel better. And that encourages striving after striving after striving. And so instead, what if you felt better now? What if you enjoyed where you are now? And it reminds me of residency. And I did a podcast a while back with Dr. Tanya Kaler about um, coaching in graduate medical education. And we were talking about the fact that when many of us look back on our residency training now, I loved so many things about my residency training, especially the people that I met and the connections and the degree of learning. Now, there was a lot of other things about it I didn't love, but I didn't really even connect with that in the moment because I was so focused on the suffering and the lack of sleep and not taking the time to actually enjoy where we are. That residency in and of itself is an amazing experience. Same kind of thing with a newborn. As a pediatrician, right? We just want to sleep. That's all we can focus on is the striving to sleep rather than this moment of like snuggling with a newborn in the middle of the night, which is amazing. And when you get to the other end of parenting, like I am, you're like, wow, that was so amazing. I wish I could go back. It was so wonderful. And so again, by striving to always be somewhere else, we miss the beauty and magic right in front of us. This non-striving is also a practice of surrender. It reminds me of Shavasana. And I bring that up because most people, that's their favorite part of yoga and it feels amazing. And so if we actually could think like, oh, non-striving is practicing little bits of Shavasana in our life and recognizing the positive that comes out of that experience is pretty amazing. And it isn't just totally, it is letting go, but we actually participate in it. We have to be present. We have to be conscious. We have to make it happen. We have to actually lie on our mat. And so recognizing that it's not totally surrendering, it's choosing to participate in this process of non-striving and this process of being and this process of surrendering.
You bring up a really important point, that non-striving is a choice that all of us can make.
Yeah. So we wanted to share some benefits of non-striving. And number one for me is it's physiologically helpful. So non-striving is healthy and healing for your nervous system, particularly your parasympathetic nervous system. And that when we have a healthy nervous system, one that feels safe and one that isn't in constant fight or flight, that's where we have the creativity. That's where we have the connection. That's where we have the clarity. And that's where we can access curiosity. And so what reminds me of this is like when you're in the shower, you're not really striving. You're just hanging out in the shower. It feels good. And that's where you often have these amazing epiphanies, which are beautiful. Or you're on a walk and you're not talking and you're not hiking as fast as you can to the top of the mountain. You're just walking in nature. And that's very often where you get this great idea. And so that's a beautiful exemplar of the benefits of non-striving. And recognizing that we can do that. Many people think I'll do that non-striving on my vacation 6 months from now. But how can you bring little moments of non-striving into your day? We started off with a moment of pause, which is pausing is non-striving for a moment. Could it be breathing? Could it be 5 minutes or one day of not working? I actually took yesterday and didn't work yesterday, and it was lovely. And just like really set the intention that it was going to be a non-striving, non-accomplishing day. And I encourage you to try that, to take a day where it's not a chore day, it's not an errands day, it doesn't have a long to-do list, it's a day of rest. So what have you learned from your current non-striving, I'll put air quote, experiment?
Well, I hope that this non-striving era becomes intertwined with the rest of my life, frankly. I'm definitely much more present, mind, body, spirit, thoughts, actions, emotions, body sensations, much more aware. My kids, I've brought up before, definitely notice that I'm around more, even though technically I'm actually working about the same number of clinic days as I was before. My kids are noticing it, and I think that speaks a lot. They were actually like, "Is something wrong? Like, why are you here all the time?"
Yeah.
So I'm definitely enjoying that space that I'm intentionally creating. There's a lot of space now for internal and external exploration, rekindling, and also finding new hobbies. Like more recently, I've been delving back into fantasy fiction reading, loving that. And actually, right after we record this podcast, I want to finish up this book that I am currently in the midst of reading. And I've also invested in leveling up my own fitness along with my cancer survivor dragon boat team because we are actually on the Thursday eve of our home festival this coming weekend. And as part of that, I'm much more proficient on something that I've always wanted to do, which is to paddle in an outrigger canoe. And for those of you who don't know, an outrigger canoe originated in the Polynesian islands, and they are very narrow. They're very sleek and slim and very cool looking, in my opinion, because they have these arms that come out from that very slender, thin part where you sit, that connects to like a little buoy floating device. So I'm much more proficient in doing that. Um, and then honestly, overall, I just feel much less stressed because there has been a very intentional increase in parasympathetic tone. Um, Partly also because I'm much more intentional about what projects I sign up for, what committees, what talks to give. So there have been a lot more no's for asks of me as part of my non-striving era, but that's been opening up so many more yeses. And even if I don't know what the yeses are right now in this moment, I know that if it's a no to something that's not quite in alignment, I know that I'm saying yes to something in the future, and non-striving allows me to do that.
And so it's not about giving up your aspirations or not making any change. It's
Yeah, I think non-striving facilitates change, right? That's the
yes,
paradox here.
yes,
Like
yes.
there is a change in state when you non-strive because it is different than your
Mhm,
norm.
mhm. And that actually leads to more change that's likely more in alignment. Do you find that you have more creativity now that you are practicing non-striving?
Yeah, there are ideas that crop up. Um, Not necessarily about like, oh, I need to post that on social media, but more even about like um, decorations for Halloween, for instance. Like
Or even ways of living or things you might want to do?
exactly, like
How
it's about the next talk or like the next best idea at all. It's really interwoven into day to day life that makes it all the more rich. Like I've really felt the extraordinary in the ordinary, and I really am relishing in that.
also, has it improved your connections?
100%, especially with my children. And I also will say that because of the non-striving, when I'm in clinic, I am able to make the human connections with my patients, and provide a spaciousness during the clinic visit that I don't think was there as much because I was wanting to get to the next question to see what the patient would say for this next question that I had to like check off my list of history of present illness questions. But rather there has been some space for talking on a human level, just out of curiosity. Like
So,
finding out one of my patients is also an outrigger canoe paddler just recently.
yeah, non-striving, you just said, increases the richness of your life, helps you find the extraordinary in the ordinary. It facilitates change and transformation. It improves connection and um, gives you access to more creativity and curiosity about the world.
Yep.
Anything you would add?
Well, I'm gonna ask you a question is what have you noticed? Because you've seen me through all the different phases and eras of my
Yes.
life over the last like at this point
I
five,
love
6
this. What I have noticed is a lightness of being and more laughter and more fun, which is funny as I say that, because one of the things that I put on my list of words for the year was fun, which when you set that as a word, it's a bit of an intention and it's a bit of a striving to have more of it. And yet you are finding it through the opposite path of non striving. And I would say that that is true for me as well. Not that we don't have fun when we're in the midst of doing something, but it's the being and the presence that gives us access to that fun and connection. And I'm going to borrow your non-strivingness and see what happens to my fun over the next little bit in the rest of 2024, because I think that this conversation has opened up that portal to like, And one of the reasons I wanted to list that, like non-striving increases richness. It helps you find extraordinary in the ordinary. I'm now going to say it increases fun and laughter and lightness and facilitates change and transformation and curiosity and creativity. Like, I'm absolutely incentivized to try it. And I think that many of us who are high achievers are afraid of non-striving. What will happen if I non-strive? It's a bit like what will happen if I rest? Non-striving is seen in a judgmental way. What if it were seen as a superpower?
strive to non-strive.
Yeah, interesting. Well, so how can you engage in it without striving? That's a very important question. And I think it's more a matter of allowing it and giving yourself permission to do it rather than striving for it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so non-striving in order for that to happen needs some space.
Yeah.
The momentum of non-striving is space.
Yeah. And even with neuroplasticity, that if we don't have space, we can't have neuroplasticity. We don't learn and grow. And so when we're just shoving more things in there, they don't stick because of the state of your nervous system. And so this space literally creates space for change and creates the opportunity for those things to happen. It's like the grease.
So we'll leave you with some reflection questions. Where are some areas of life that you would like to adopt a non-striving attitude? And what are some ways you might try non-striving?
What could you commit to not doing? What would more being look like? And could you shift simply 1 or 5% towards more being rather than doing? What tenets of mindfulness might you practice more of to help you get closer to non striving? Thanks so much for listening today. We encourage you to share the podcast with others who might benefit, especially those who might benefit in your life from non striving. And we encourage you to consider doing some work on this area. It is one of the most transformative tools if you can get yourself to begin to allow it and give yourself permission to non strive. And I want to acknowledge here that non striving is not the first step for many of us. It's a step that we get to after doing a fair bit of work. And you, Ni Cheng, have done a fair bit of work, and now you're at the non-striving portion. But had you tried to non-strive 5 years ago, I'm thinking it might have looked very different and might have not been accessible. And my bringing that up is not judgmental of you, but to point out that it is a process, and it's a process of acquiring a number of these other tools, such as accepting yourself and patience and learning to let go of control and tapping into curiosity and being able to practice mindfulness in some way so that your nervous system can practice non-striving without too much stress. And so all of this is a practice, and it's a growing of a practice. And so we encourage you, join us for a retreat where you can begin to learn some of these little things, or reach out, because we would love to work with you to help you begin this most amazing journey so you can enjoy the journey rather than focus on the end product.
Thanks so much for joining us.
We encourage you to dive into the show notes for each episode for more learnings and resources.
We also invite you to take a listen to the many other Mindful Healers podcast episodes. And please share the podcast far and wide with colleagues, friends, and family.
If our message and approach resonate with you, we would love to work with you.
When you listen to a podcast, you consume information, but when you work with us, you can actually practice and change.
We offer coaching and mindfulness experiences, talks, workshops, retreats, and more. Connect with us at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
The content of this podcast is not medical or life advice. We invite you to participate in the mindful moments we offer at the end of most of our podcasts, but please only do so safely.
Welcome to this mindful moment offering. Inviting you to close your eyes or lower your gaze a few inches in front of you if that's safe for you to do so. Taking a moment to notice the support of the ground beneath your feet. Reminding you that it's always there, unconditionally. You simply have to notice. As you settle into this practice, being open to where the mind sets its attention on. It could be sounds, thoughts, body sensations, emotions. And simply noticing where the attention goes. Not judging it, not trying to change any aspect of where the attention is going, but simply allowing what you notice noticing the shifting attention from body sensations to emotions to thoughts. And if the attention rests on thoughts, imagining these thoughts like clouds passing through the sky or leaves drifting down a stream. Observing where the attention goes. In this act of non-striving, you can simply notice where the attention wanders to. without any judgment, without need to change this moment for what it is. And as you're ready, blinking open eyes, letting the light back in. Thanks so much for practicing with me today.